Welcome back to Great Day Live. Now, today is all about loving the Ville with our partners at Northeast Christian Church. I'm Joanne Dixon, and joining me this morning, of course, is Pastor Tyler McKenzie of Northeast Christian Church. Now, we've been talking this morning about Northeast Christian's Love the Ville outreach program and their mission to connect with communities across Kentuckiana. Can you tell us a bit about what Love the Ville is all about?
Yeah. As we said earlier, Love the Ville is just your neighbors. Like it's the person who lives next door. It's the guy you run into at the grocery store, the parents of, some of the kids on your ball team, or maybe the person volunteering at, the soup kitchen down the street. Literally, it's just thousands of people serving tens of thousands of hours and donating literally millions of dollars for the common good of our city. And these people, for the most part, are bonded together by our church, Northeast Christian Church. But we have many partners and people beyond our church that really make the Love the Ville movement great. We have big partners. We have small partners serving all across the city. And we're especially proud of those partners because they are ultimately what bring the expertise and the relationships and the systems and structure to us so that we can funnel our people and our resources into them and solve some of the most pressing needs our city's facing right now.
Absolutely. And now you mentioned you do have a lot of partnerships and collaborations. Can you tell us a bit more about who you're working with to better our community?
Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe one of the coolest partnerships, and I alluded to it earlier, but I want to highlight it again, is with a group called Prisoners Hope. They're working in a lot of prisons around the state of Kentucky. What a lot of people don't know is that in December 2019, just before the pandemic, 2,500 prisoners were released, and they got to re-enter society. And then like a month or two later, boom, society shuts down, and it made it extremely difficult, almost impossible for some of these men and women to get driver's licenses. And having an official form of identification is so important for housing, for employment, for government assistance, all the things they need to re-enter well. So cool thing about Prisoners Hope is they worked throughout 2020 with a few other organizations to advocate for these folks re-entering society, and they changed 3 Kentucky laws so that now they can get a liberation identification or a new photo ID. Just huge justice work there. Or we have another partner called Up for Women and Children. Basically, they're focused specifically on homeless women and their kids in the Ville. And last month alone, I kid you, I kid you not, they helped 14 women get out of homelessness. They ended homelessness for 14 of our neighbors in this city. That sort of stuff gets me fired up. We are so proud to call folks like that our partners and support them.
Wow, that is incredible. Okay, and today we're talking a lot about people, groups, and events that have inspired us. And as you mentioned, one of your biggest influences is Martin Luther King Jr. Can you tell us a bit more about why he's impacted you personally and in your vocation?
Yeah, so February is Black History Month, and I love celebrating some of the history makers that inspired us. If you go and read Dr. King's sermons or some of his speeches and writings from the 50s and the 60s, what's so amazing and astounding about them is that they seem like they're written to us in 2020 or 2021. Like it's like he was writing into the future, and they're more relevant for us today. And there are so many principles from his teaching and wisdom in life that have animated our Love the Ville movement. One is his distinction between what he would call 2 pieces. If you will, there are basically two sorts of pieces that people lean into. There's a negative piece, which is the absence of negative force, like a conflict or tension or war. And then there's a positive piece, which is what he would advocate for, which is the presence of justice and goodwill and compassion and equality. What often happens, though, is when we say, we just want peace, what we're saying is everybody just, okay, be quiet. Let's not talk about it. Let's just all agree to disagree and, go on with our lives. But if injustice is present, then the absence of tension is an actual peace. True peace is working for justice for all. And so that's part of the reason why we do what we do with Love the Ville. So everybody loves to talk about King's I Have a Dream speech, right? And it's a powerful speech. In it, King gives us, that amazing kind of run where he's like, I have a dream that I have a dream that one day our nation will rise up and recognize the true meaning of its creed, that all are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and slave owners will come together and sit together around the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day my 4 children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but rather by the content of their character. I have a dream today. And that's powerful. That's what King would call the promissory note. That's in some of the founding documents of our country that point to a better future. But what a lot of people forget about in the I Have a Dream speech is that King also challenges us not to partake of what he calls the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Yes, this is a dream that we all have, but don't be patient for it. No, be advocates of positive peace and work to make it happen now. In Christian lingo, this would be the difference between being a peacekeeper versus a peacemaker. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, right? Peacekeepers oftentimes like to say, well, let's just all get along, no conflict. Peacemakers say, if healthy conflict and tension is inevitable in order to establish justice, then that's what we have to do in order to make peace. And so they lean into it. Now, I would also say, though, that what I love about King is that in his making of peace, he always encouraged nonviolence. Nonviolent civil disobedience is what he advocated for. And I love the activist spirit of our current generation, but I don't think King would always love the spirit in which we're active, because right now we see lots of physical violence and emotional violence being done for the sake of justice. And my fear, and I think King's fear, was that if we become propagators of violence, then ultimately that will do harm to our soul, and we will become the very things that we disdain about those who are oppressing or those who are complicit with injustice. So, okay, I could go on so much more, but
You've got me
he's a real
inspired this
inspiration for
morning.
me.
Yes. Okay. So we've got lots more in this special edition of Great Day Live in partnership with Northeast Christian Church. So stay with us.